Hello Kitty, me gusta mi titties, me gusta mi booty. Hoy me tomo selfie con filtro Hello Kitty.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the next episode of Dangerous Games. We are super excited to have you here. It is a long episode, so I am here with Sarah. I am so lucky every single day that I get to talk to her, and you guys are lucky for the once a week that you get graced with her beautiful face
Oh
and
my
her
goodness.
brilliant presence.
Blow
And
more smoke. Blow more smoke.
it's the truth. I speak only the truth. And if you follow this podcast, you know that I only tell the truth. So today is a Courtney episode, and it is a long one. And I'm apologizing in advance, but there's so much that happened with this. And the two people that are involved are both incredibly famous in their own right, that there's so much about them. And I didn't want to focus more on the murderer and less on the victim. So it's like 50-50. So I'm just going to jump right in. I'm sure that everybody has heard of this man and this woman. They are famous South Africans. He is an Olympian known as the Blade Runner. I'm sure you guys have heard of him. Oscar Leonard Carl Pistorius is our murderer this week. He was born November 22nd, 1986 in South Africa. He was the second born of three children to Hank and Sheila Pistorius. Oscar was a middle child. He had an older brother named Carl and a younger sister named Amy. Hank was a very successful man, owing to his family's agricultural lime company. So they had a mine, basically, and they mined lime and zinc, but it was generational. So they did well for themselves. Oscar grew up solidly middle class, upper middle class, I would say. But by most accounts, it was not a happy home. Hank was described as a former party animal. Obviously, he was a rich kid, grew up with he didn't have to work for what he had. So he was a party animal with a taste for younger women.
Oh.
And he divorced Oscar's mother when Oscar was just 6 years old and was, by all accounts, an absentee father. He was not involved. And that comes up later in his life as an adult, too. Oscar was born with a rare condition called fibular hemimelia or longitudinal fibular deficiency. And it is a congenital absence of the fibula and is one of the most common congenital absence of long bone in the extremities. Oscar was born without a fibula in both of his legs. Like neither of his legs had a fibula.
Whoa.
So the doctors told his parents that he would probably never be able to walk. And at 11 months old, his parents made the very difficult decision to have his legs amputated below the knees. So he's
a Special Olympian.
You would think so, but he's not. And that's also very contentious. So his whole life was kind of contentious.
Throwing it out there.
Yeah. Oscar ended up beating the odds, and he learned to walk on fiberglass pegs as a child. When it was clear Oscar wasn't going to let his condition prevent him from doing whatever he wanted, his mother encouraged him to participate in various sports. Oscar would say that his mother was one of the greatest influences in his life. He adored her. So it was a devastating blow to him when she died at the age of 42, when Oscar was just 15 years old.
That's young.
She suffered an adverse reaction to medication after being wrongly diagnosed with hepatitis. So they gave her medicine and it killed her. When he wrote his autobiography, he started with a note she had written to him as a baby before his amputation surgery. So she wrote this note to him before he went into surgery that he would be able to read someday when he was older. And it said, "The real loser is never the person who crosses the finish line last. The real loser is the person who sits on the side, the person who does not even try to compete."
I feel like that's a quote, nowadays.
He really lived his life by this.
That's awesome.
Because Oscar did try to compete. He played water polo, rugby, and he wrestled until he was injured in a rugby game in 2003. He hurt his knee. He would not be deterred, though. He started training with the track team to rehabilitate his knee. So he hurt his knee in rugby, and then he started running track to try and rehabilitate his knee. And he just immediately took to it. He was an incredible runner.
Wow.
He started training with Coach Ampy Lou and was fitted with his first running blades, which would make him famous. You would recognize the long blades that he would run with. The first set that he got were not as strong as he needed them to be because they just couldn't withstand the work that he was putting in. And he was referred to fellow Paralympian and engineer Brian Fraser, who helped him with a pair that worked for him. So these were designed by an engineer who was a Paralympian who also designed these blades, which is insanely cool. Everything about this story is so insanely tragic because he like defied all of these odds and then just destroyed his whole life. These blades created his first nickname, the Blade Runner, that like you would see in all of the papers and everything on TV when he was running. I remember this. I was like 19 when all of this was going on in 2003. So he would also be called the fastest man on no legs. Pistorius won the 200-meter event at the 2004 Paralympic Games in Athens and claimed a bronze medal in the 100-meter. Oscar would often say, "You're not disabled by the disabilities you have. You are able by the abilities you have." Oscar began his education in 2006. He was studying for a Bachelor of Commerce in Business Management with Sports Science at the University of Pretoria. All of his training was getting in the way of his education, however, and he would joke that he hoped to finish his degree by the time he was 30. I guess he had a plan. So by 2007, Pistorius raced at an elite invitational competition in Rome. So this was invitation only.
Wow.
Oscar was the only amputee in the race. His performance in that race sparked a huge debate about whether or not his prosthetic blades gave him an unfair advantage against his able-bodied competition. So here he is, a double amputee running on these blades, and people were like very upset because they said that he had an advantage by having.
I don't think he does.
Yes. Eventually he was cleared to compete by the Court of Arbitration for Sport, though.
Good.
But it is still considered a controversial decision because he went through a full litany of tests, and some of the tests indicated that he actually exerted less energy than his competition.
Gotcha.
So,
I see what you're saying.
Yeah. He would go on to compete in the 2008 later that summer, and Pistorius won 3 gold medals at the Beijing Paralympics in the T43 and T44 class, 100 meter, 200 meter, and 400 meters. And he also set a world record in his class. The T43 class is for runners with only one amputation. So he was running against people who had one leg and then one prosthetic. And then the other one was the T44s for runners with both of their legs amputated.
Gotcha.
So that was the one that he actually set the record in.
Wow.
In 2009, Oscar was 22 years old, and while boating with a friend on the Vaal River near Johannesburg, the vessel apparently hit something. Paramedics stabilized him at the scene before airlifting him to the hospital. Pistorius had surgery the following day and was in stable condition but in the intensive care unit for days. He was in a coma.
Wow.
His eye was detached from his eye socket, and he had to have reconstructive surgery. He was released though in about a week. So
that's crazy.
The accident set him back in 2010, but he rebounded quickly. This is important later on. So just remember that he had this terrible accident.
Okay.
Because after this accident would be the first time Oscar would be arrested. He was accused of assaulting a 19-year-old woman at a party at his house. He vehemently denied the charges, but would later settle out of court. In 2011, he would win a gold in the 100 meter and 400 meter at the Paralympic World Cup before qualifying for the World Champions. Although he was not a member of the actual relay race that won that final, his participation in the heats that qualified for the race for the 4x4 100 meter relay earned him a World Championship silver medal. So because he was in the heats that qualified for the race, even though he didn't actually run the race, he got a silver medal as well.
That's crazy.
He was the 22nd fastest 400-meter runner in the world in 2011. 22nd fastest. Although his times did not qualify him for the South African Olympic team in 2012. So he did not get qualified. Pistorius was selected to race the individual 400 meters and the 4x4 meter relay. When he ran the former event in the London Games, he became the first amputee to compete in the track at the Olympics. So these were the regular Olympics, not regular, but like not the
Paralympics.
Yes. Although he reached the semifinal, Pistorius failed to advance to the medal round in the 4x4 relay. His team made the finals, but they did not medal. So it doesn't matter. This man was
That's so crazy.
He ran as a double amputee in the Olympics in 2012. That is incredible, in my opinion.
Crazy.
So he has all of this going for him, right? Now I'm going to move on to Reeva. She was the victim in this case, and I think it's equally, if not so much more important that we talk about her. Reeva Steenkamp was born August 19th, 1983 in Cape Town, South Africa to Barry Steenkamp, a horse trainer, and his second wife, June. She had two older siblings, Adam and Simone. Reeva was a smart and beautiful child who did very well in school. She was a passionate equestrian. When she was 15 years old, she entered a local beauty pageant and caught the eye of Barbara Robertson, who was a beauty editor. In 2004, she ended up being one of the finalists in the Weekend Post Faces of the Future competition. So she won an award. 1 year later, she was a finalist in the Herald Miss Port Elizabeth contest. She moved to Johannesburg to pursue her career in the fashion industry. She modeled for a jewelry company called Savannah Diamonds and for FHM magazine. She was twice named as one of the 100 sexiest women in the world by that magazine. She was ranked number 40 in 2011 and number 45 in 2012. That's pretty awesome.
That's crazy.
Twice top 100 most beautiful people in the world. And also became the first South African face of Avon Cosmetics. Through her teens and early 20s, Reeva's career was booming. She was one of South Africa's most sought-after models, and by the early 2000s, she appeared in advertisements of several international brands besides Avon, including Toyota, KFC, Cardinal, and Tiger Beer. As if all of that wasn't impressive enough, she enrolled in law courses at the University of Port Elizabeth. Wow. You're going to love this because this is like right up your alley. In 2005, she graduated the top of her class with a Bachelor of Laws degree and would do paralegal work while modeling. Going as far as to apply for the bar in 2011, hoping to qualify as a legal advocate by the age of 30.
Wow.
All of this is made even more impressive when you know that in 2005, she had fallen from her horse and crushed two vertebrae in her back so badly, she ended up in traction, and no one knew if she would be able to walk again. Wow. So it was her last year of university. She didn't know if she was going to be able to graduate. She didn't know if she was going to be able to walk. And she, you would think that would like destroy a lot of people. But walk she did. Reeva was a fighter, and one of her friends said she was more than just a pretty face. She had a beautiful heart and ambition. It seems that while Reeva was absolutely crushing her professional life and rebuilding herself after her accident and graduating top of her class, even though she missed a ton of school because of her injury.
Yeah.
As you see with so many successful women, she struggled to find a partner who could keep up with her and appreciate her. Before moving to Johannesburg, she had been involved with an allegedly emotionally abusive boyfriend with whom she eventually ended the relationship, but it really affected her for a long time. Her friends talk about that being a dark time for her, and when she left him and moved to Johannesburg, she had made a plan to eventually open a shelter for abused women and children. And she often gave speeches to young girls about domestic abuse awareness. Like, it was really important to her. And then for a while, she did date another man he was a rugby player named Francois Hugard. But that did not last very long. Enter Oscar Pistorius. You're going to be shocked by how short the relationship was. Because I guess I didn't realize it when all of this was happening, that how short of a time that they knew each other before this happened. So on November 4th of 2012, so that's really important, November of 2012, end of the year 2012, Reeva Steenkamp was invited to a track day at, I'm going to say this wrong, Kailami Racetrack. And it was there she met Paralympian Oscar Pistorius. They appeared to take to each other immediately. Oscar had forgotten that he had RSVP'd to the South African Sports Awards ceremony that same evening because he'd spent the whole day talking to Reeva. And on a whim, he invited her. And to his surprise, she accepted. Like, you want to come to this ball with me? And she's like, I guess. And they had just met that day. From the outside, they appeared to be a beautiful and inspiring couple. Andre Neveling, the editor of South African celebrity magazine Heat, said they look so much in love. And everybody was going on and on about what a great couple they made. Everybody thought this is the real deal. They were like the most beautiful couple. He was this amazing figure, a hero to South Africa. She was this stunning celebrity, sought after model. They really were a dynamic, perfect couple, and the entire country was just so proud of them. They were like, this is it. This is the couple of South Africa.
Right.
But with as almost everything, looks are deceiving. Reeva's mother would later say she felt the relationship was fizzling out. Reeva told her friends that while they had spent nights together, she'd actually not slept with Oscar because she wouldn't take a relationship to the next level without being certain. Oscar himself had told people he felt he was more keen on her than she was on him. Reeva's mother would also tell the court that she didn't think the relationship was making either of them happy. It was almost like it had to feel like pressure, like you get into this relationship with like he's the golden boy and she's the golden girl, and it's almost like the pressure to make it work, even if it wasn't working. I feel like maybe
that makes sense.
And it shouldn't be that hard in how short of a relationship that they had. So on the morning of February 13th, 2013, a mere 3 months after meeting Oscar, Reeva, who's a fervent defender of women, posted on Twitter to urge her followers to wear black the day after Valentine's Day in protest against violence against women. She also posted on her Instagram that day, I woke up in a happy, safe home this morning. Not everyone did. This would be tragic foreshadowing for the next 24 hours because the beautiful, smart, enigmatic, and ambitious Reeva Steenkamp would not wake up safe in her bed on February 14th. Reeva was supposed to give a speech on Valentine's Day before the students of Sandow High School in Johannesburg, South Africa, about domestic abuse. On the 13th, she went to her manager's office to go over the speech and then wrapped up her Valentine's gift for Oscar, even making another tweet asking her followers what they had up their sleeve for their loved ones on that special day. She deposited $100 into her parents' account, and one of Reeva's final messages was sent to Cecil and Desi Myers, whom she lived with in Johannesburg. These were her roommates. Around 10 p.m. on February 13th. It read, hi guys, I'm too tired. It's too far of a drive. I'm going to sleep at Oscar's tonight. See you tomorrow. Cecil and Desi did see Reeva the next day, but it was for the horrific and heartbreaking task of identifying her body because in the early morning of February 13th, or 14th, 2013, Reeva Steenkamp was shot and killed by Oscar Pistorius at his Pretoria home. Oscar called authorities, and when they arrived, they found the Olympian sitting on the floor of the bathroom with Steenkamp covered in her blood. He admitted shooting her 4 times, but claimed he was terrified and thought she was an intruder. Oscar was immediately arrested and charged with murder on the 15th. It took 5 more days for Nike to suspend their deal with him. 2 days after Nike releases him, he leaves jail after posting a cash bond of 100,000 rand. Rand is South African money. It's about 11,000 American dollars. And then another 900,000 rand, about $100,000 was due by March 1st. So he had to pay like 10% and then another amount to get,
Gotcha.
The conditions of Pistorius's bail are that he must avoid his home where the shooting occurred, relinquish his passport, and abstain from drinking alcohol. In a wild decision, just 1 month later, Judge Bert Baum lifts the travel ban on Pistorius, saying he sees no reason that Pistorius should not be allowed to travel for competition. The ban on drinking and alcohol and avoiding his home where the shooting occurred, the literal crime scene, were also lifted. They're like,
What?
Yeah. You're going to be infuriated about this. Then on August 19th, 6 months after the shooting death of Steenkamp, Oscar Pistorius is officially finally indicted. 6 months. And this time he's allowed to travel, basically do what he wanted to do. Pistorius' murder trial began on the 3rd of March, 2014 in the Pretoria High Court. On May 20th, 2014, the trial proceedings were adjourned until June to enable Pistorius to undergo a psychiatric evaluation to establish whether he could be held criminally responsible for shooting Steenkamp. Judge Thukaisel Mazapa agreed to a request for the evaluation by the prosecutor, Jerry Nell, after a forensic psychiatrist, Meryl Vorster, testified for the defense that she had diagnosed Pistorius with generalized anxiety disorder, or GAD. On the 30th of June, the trial resumed after the evaluation reports that said Pistorius could be held criminally responsible. That while he had this, he was still able to know right from wrong. The state prosecutor was quoted as saying, Mr. Pistorius did not suffer from a mental illness or defect that would have rendered him not criminally responsible for the offense charged. Generalized anxiety disorder, I'm just going to kind of quickly explain what that is so you can see kind of what the defense was going to go for with this, is a mental and behavioral disorder, specifically an anxiety disorder characterized by excessive, uncontrollable, and often irrational worry about events or activities. Worry that often interferes with daily functioning, and individuals with GAD are often overly concerned about everyday matters such as health, finances, death, family relationships, work difficulties. Symptoms may include excessive worry, restlessness, trouble sleeping, exhaustion, irritability, sweating, and trembling. So that has to be like overwhelming to have. I can understand like that being something difficult to deal with. Oscar's defense was that workers had left ladders outside of his bathroom window and that he had woken in terror because of his anxiety, thinking about how the fact that the bathroom window did not have intruder bars. So he like convinced himself, according to them, that someone was going to break in or was in the act of breaking in. He said, and this is a quote directly from Oscar, I felt a sense of terror rushing over me. There are no burglar bars across the bathroom window, and I knew that contractors who worked at my house had left ladders outside. Although I did not have my prosthetic legs on, I had mobility on my stumps. I believed that someone had entered my house. I was too scared to switch on the light. I grabbed my 9mm pistol from underneath my bed. On my way to the bathroom, I screamed for him or them to get out of my house and for Reeva to phone the police. It was pitch dark in the bedroom, and I thought Reeva was in bed. According to Oscar, he grabbed a cricket bat and his father's gun that he had been storing for him and screamed to Reeva, who he thought was in bed, to call authorities. He then began beating on the door, demanding who was ever in there to get out of his house. He fired shots at the door, and that's when he realized Reeva was not in bed and what he had done. Prosecutors described a wildly different version of events. Neighbors had testified to hearing a gunshot, a woman scream, and then more gunshots, which would completely decimate his story.
Different. Yep.
Because then it was like if he shot her once and she screamed she's still alive, he could have stopped.
Yep.
But he shot 3 more times. They also pointed to the fact that Reeva had locked herself in the bathroom and she had her phone, as if she was running away from him and she had locked herself in there. They believe that Reeva and Oscar had a fight and he shot her in anger. They read text messages about the fight the couple had recently, where Oscar had accused Reeva of flirting with a mutual friend, and a damning message where Reeva told him, and I quote, "I'm scared of you sometimes and how you snap at me."
Wow.
Yeah. People have also speculated that in addition to Oscar's anxiety, the injuries he sustained to his head from the boating accident could have caused a personality change, making him more impulsive. I remember after he had that boating accident, he did get arrested for allegedly, assaulting a woman.
Yep.
Oscar, in his defense, even tried to allude to this during the trial, but it was never really fleshed out, and the prosecution brought out a witness who showed that Pistorius was once again lying on the stand. He claimed he had crashed because the sun was in his eyes, but the witness said that was impossible as it was dusk at the time of the accident, and there was no sun. The boating accident ultimately had no effect on the trial other than to show that Oscar had a comfortability with lying. According to the defense, the sound the neighbor heard was actually the cricket bat, like beating on the door, and they did a test in the court where they hit a door with the cricket bat, and then they fired the gun, and it did sound eerily similar.
Weird.
So the defense thought that they had made a point with that, but Oscar testified that he put on his prosthetics to beat down the door with the bat, but forensics proved that was untrue and he did not have them on. So he was lying. And if you're in such a fear of
right,
all of this is going on, why are you stopping to put your legs on if you have mobility?
Exactly.
He once again lied. Oscar would also throw up during the trial when graphic photos of Reeva's damaged skull were shown, and his father would refuse to sign an affidavit claiming that the gun and ammunition that were in his house were not Oscar's weapons, but they belonged to his father, Hank. His father said, nope, not signing that. And Oscar wasn't licensed to have these guns, so he actually did end up getting charged with illegal guns too. That was added on. Ultimately, Pistorius was found guilty of culpable homicide, which is basically South Africans' version of manslaughter. The South African term for unintentionally but unlawfully killing a person. And the gun was the difference of because his dad wouldn't sign that waiver saying that it was his gun. So gotcha. The gun charge is what made it manslaughter. Otherwise, he might not have even gotten in any trouble at this point in the trial. In yet another shocking decision, he is sentenced to only 5 years in prison. Yeah. Prosecutors immediately appealed the verdict, and 1 year later, in June, South Africa's Department of Correctional Services announces a parole board is set to recommend that Pistorius be released from prison after 1 year and transferred to house arrest in August. So he served, and it only ended up being 10 months that he served, and then they were...
And someone's dead, but he's gonna get to live his life. Okay.
Yeah, and he was only found guilty of manslaughter. So when this was announced, the Steenkamp's parents, the media, and the women's groups exploded.
Yeah, I bet.
A huge effort to prevent his release, especially since the appeals were still being heard for, they were trying to appeal the actual verdict in the first place.
Oh, gotcha.
And he had not even served the full 1/5 of his sentence that was required by law for him to even be eligible for parole yet. But by October, Pistorius was released from jail and sent to live at his uncle's house under house arrest for 4 years. Yeah. However, just 2 months later, a judge overturned the previous conviction of culpable homicide. Judge Eric Leach ruled that the Paralympic gold medalist should have foreseen that his firing a gun would have killed whoever was behind the door in his bathroom, regardless of whether he thought it was Steenkamp or an intruder.
What do you think it was? A dog?
I don't know. State prosecutors, you shouldn't kill a dog either. What the hell?
I'm just saying.
State prosecutors appealed the verdict of culpable homicide, seeking conviction on more severe charges.
Yeah.
However, once that happened, he was once again granted bail because now they overturned his conviction, so he can have bail and get out of jail.
Correct.
So he was granted bail and he was allowed to travel for up to 20 kilometers away from his uncle's house. In July of 2016, the same judge that found him guilty of just manslaughter, the same judge is still in charge of this. And this is going to make you so mad. So just seriously, prepare yourself for how angry you're going to get. Because when I read this, I was like, what the?
I'm ready.
that found him guilty of manslaughter in the first trial found him guilty of murder. So he changed his mind and he was like, okay, this is murder after all.
So was the water different today?
It gets worse though. Just wait. It gets even worse than that. So, but he only sentenced him to 6 years for murder.
So note to self,
this
you can
judge
murder
was a
somebody.
hardcore fanboy. Because wait till you hear what he says.
Oh God.
Oscar's team thought this would be the end, but in 2017, the prosecution appealed the sentence, saying it was far too lenient. During Pistorius' sentencing for murder, the judge cited mitigating circumstances for lesser punishment, saying Pistorius. So this is what the judge said when he said. So the prosecution is once again appealing this because this is not enough of a punishment. And then they cited that it was too lenient. And then they cited what the judge said during sentencing.
Yeah, lay it on us.
He said that there was mitigating circumstances and that he felt that Pistorius was genuinely remorseful and a good candidate for rehabilitation.
Yeah, whatever.
The minimum sentence for murder in South Africa is 15 years, and he only gave him 6. But individual judges can lower the sentence if there are substantial and compelling reasons to do so. The judge described Pistorius as a fallen hero who will never be at peace and sentenced him to 6 years in prison. So basically, boo-hoo, he's this very famous man and his whole life fell apart. So he should only get 6 years in jail because poor him. For killing somebody.
Hey, Martha Stewart.
My God. So I read that. I was so mad. The Supreme Court Appeals disagreed. They were like, nope. And in 2017, they increased his sentence to 13 years and 5 months for the murder of his girlfriend, Steenkamp. Oscar continued to try to appeal his sentence, but lost his last appeal in April of 2018. Pistorius was actually eligible. He's actually eligible now for parole, like really eligible this year. He has a trial set on March 31st.
Can I go to it?
Yeah. So, well, I mean, if you want to go to South Africa.
No.
So this is crazy too. I'm going to tell you about this and you're going to be like, what the fuck? These people have not been victimized enough with first him not getting, convicted properly. And then the judge basically making him the victim of this. And then South Africa participates in something called restorative justice. Before an offender can be considered for parole placement, he or she must participate in programs aimed at preparing them for crime-free life beyond incarceration. And you think, oh, that sounds great. Because I was like, oh, that sounds great. But included in this, the offenders are like, they have to acknowledge and take responsibility for their actions. The process is aimed to create like an opportunity for parties to reconcile or apologize for their actions. So Pistorius has to, in fact, meet with the Steenkamps, her parents, and have a conversation with them and apologize to them and make amends. So in order for him to get parole, they have to agree to go to this meeting. And like they're pressured to do this because this is like part of their judicial system there. So Barry, her father, went and met with him and he called it traumatizing. That he had yeah. So as of today, as we're recording this, he has his trial set for the 31st. So I will like do an update with what happens with that. I feel so bad for her family and her friends that they had to get dragged through this trial that was just garbage. It's a garbage trial.
To see how different their judicial system is. I mean, I know it is. Everywhere is different. But
like it wasn't necessarily just even it was just another case of like a rich guy, a rich white athletic guy getting like preferential treatment over a woman that he murdered. Or
if it was somebody who was poor, they would be doing
full-time. Or not a famous athlete or a national treasure. Like the fact that he killed her and the judge was like, oh, he feels really bad about it. Like,
that's great.
He's real sorry, guys.
I bet everybody feels bad about it. I mean,
he's so sorry. He's a piece of shit. He killed her. He should be in jail. He should be in jail for more than 13 years. But at least he got that. And good on their like Supreme Court for taking care of that. Because what the honestly.
I couldn't,
So enough about him. He's a piece of garbage. I would like to talk about Reeva's mom for a minute. June Steenkamp, Reeva's mother, has taken over the baton from Reeva to continue the work that she had started. So I wanted to talk about what Reeva's family is doing to honor her life. Had she lived, she was supposed to deliver that speech on Valentine's Day to the group of teenagers, urging them not to give in to emotional abuse. So on October 21st, 2015, June returned to her daughter's high school in Port Elizabeth, where she actually went to high school, and she recited the same speech that Reeva had planned. Reading from Reeva's note, she said, "I hope that you all had an amazing Valentine's Day and that you were spoiled with love and roses and chocolate. Go home and tell your parents, your siblings, and your neighbors that they are appreciated and that you will go to bed with a happy heart and an open mind for the future." So that was part of the speech that Reeva was going to give on Valentine's Day, and her mom gave the speech at her high school where Reeva had graduated. 1 month later, in November of 2015, June registered the Reeva Rebecca Steenkamp Foundation. June is trying to raise awareness of the horrific statistics of violence and abuse against women and children, not only in South Africa, but around the world, by using her voice to educate and speak against the abuse of women and children, as Reeva had done. And I will link this charity in the show notes if you guys want to go check that out. They do a lot of really great stuff. So that is the absolutely horrific and sad and tragic murder of Reeva Steenkamp.
Just infuriates you when
that whole trial was just absolute garbage. That
there's
judge,
no justice for her. Yeah, they got some. They got some at the end of the day, but they had, like you said, they had to go through and relive this
over and
multiple
over and
times
over and over.
because they couldn't get it right the first time. No, they could have. They chose not to get it
Yeah.
right the first time.
So first they get the, manslaughter, and he gets a year in jail and then 4 years on, house arrest. And then they overturn that and they're like, oh, thank God. And he gets, found guilty of murder, which he should have. But then he only gets 6 years, and the judge has the balls to be like, oh, he feels sorry. But he feels
everybody feels sorry when they get
life
caught.
is ruined.
That
She's
means
dead.
nothing. That means absolutely nothing. Everybody feels sorry
less
when they're
than
caught.
nothing. His life is ruined. She's dead.
Yeah. So
I
what?
saw a picture of him in jail. He got all fat and he grew his hair out. I'm like, good.
Good.
It made me so mad.
It's not even necessarily that it's because it's a crime against a woman. I would feel this passionate if it was a crime against a man.
Anyone
And
could
it
get away
was
with it like that.
they were done wrong by the justice system.
Anyone who has the balls to be like,
Yep.
this guy
To
murdered
use their
someone.
power in such a horrible way.
Yeah. This guy murdered someone, but he feels real sorry. And murdering that person ruined his life.
Good.
That person is dead. They're
Good.
dead. I don't care if his life is. I hope his life is ruined.
A dead body can't ruin your life. You ruined your own effing life.
Yeah.
Like, you made that decision.
You
Granted,
killed her.
even if you had a mental illness, which they apparently chalked up as a no, you can say whatever you want. Just like, I'm sorry, it's like anybody who openly carries, you take that risk of ever having to use that. You take that risk. You make that decision
Well, he
because
didn't even
you're
have that
the
gun
one.
legally.
Yep.
He had an illegal gun. He shot her, and then him murdering her is 100% the worst part about this case. But that judge being like,
yep,
anyone who's like, oh, his life was ruined. She's dead. She's dead.
He chose this. He chose this.
I don't care if his life is ruined. I don't care if he made the choice. She's dead.
Yep.
You don't get to feel sorry for yourself
Nope.
and your life being ruined. You killed you. She doesn't even have the option to feel sorry about her life now, because there isn't a life to feel sorry about. She's dead, and you have to pay for that.
And if it is true that she did scream, that even makes it more disgusting, because you could have easily stopped. You knew who that was at that point if she did scream after the first shot.
He couldn't, though, because then if he shot her and they were in the middle of a fight and she lives, she can be like, that's attempted murder now.
But I'm just saying he could have.
He could have stopped.
You can't use it as I didn't know. But if you did know and you continue, then you are a murderer. you've got her blood on your hands. Get over it.
Yeah. I was so hot when I read that. I was so mad. I'm like, how dare this judge be like, his life is ruined? Like, you don't deserve to be a judge because you're fucking dumb. That's how I feel. I hope
You're
your life is
supposed
ruined.
to be neutral, non-biased.
It's very biased. Like, oh, poor him. His life is ruined. Yeah, well, she's
whatever.
I can't. I don't know what else to say to this. She is dead. And I don't care if his life is ruined. I hope his life is ruined because
I hope so too. And I hope they do not allow him to see another day outside of themselves.
He's up for parole. I hope that he doesn't get to get out. But, you know, it seems like they really want him to be out of jail. And I don't know. So we'll keep you posted.
Yes.
Sorry if I made you as mad as I was at this case. And I hope you guys make good choices and stay safe out there.
Yes.
Until next time. Bye.
Bye.
Hello Kitty, me gusta mi tibis, me gusta mi booty, hoy me tomo un selfie